The morning was quite chaotic due to a power outage during the night, which caused our alarm clock to fail. As a result, both my wife and I had to rush to get ready for work. However, she was in more of a hurry than I was because my job starts at 9 o'clock a.m., and it's just a 15-minute drive from our house. Before leaving for work, my wife usually checks her email. Unfortunately, in her haste, she forgot to shut down her computer, just as I was about to turn it off. I came across an email my wife had received a few days ago with the subject line "Aloha to a great time." Out of curiosity, I opened it, only to discover that she was planning a trip to Hawaii with another man while I would be away on a 2-week business trip. This revelation hit me hard and left me feeling devastated. Allow me to provide some background. Kathy, my wife, and I were introduced by mutual friends over 12 years ago, who believed we would hit it off. It turned out that we both valued fitness and a healthy lifestyle. Kathy worked as a yoga instructor and personal trainer, while I pursued a career in marketing at a mid-sized company, aspiring for growth. I have a passion for the outdoors and often engage in activities like hiking, mountain biking, and running. We shared many hobbies and looked good as a couple. Kathy is 5 tall, with long brown hair, brown eyes, and an attractive figure. I stand at 6 with blonde hair, blue eyes, and an athletic physique. Was it love at first sight? No, but we developed a strong friendship that later blossomed into romance. It took a couple of years, but we eventually tied the knot, and I believed we were happy until now. However, after reading this email, I realized that our marriage was facing serious challenges. Apparently, Kathy and this guy named Gary had been secretly planning a romantic getaway for some time now, despite knowing about my upcoming business trip, which was a significant opportunity for me and the company. She went ahead with it. I was gearing up for a 2-week business trip with some colleagues to secure big accounts. Landing these deals could mean a promotion and a nice pay raise. But now, all I could focus on was this email in front of me. I started digging into her other emails to learn more about this Gary. Turns out she had kept all their correspondences neatly filed under trips. Convenient, right? Kathy isn't tech savvy, but I'm on computers all the time, so navigating through was easy for me. It was clear that she had been involved with this guy for the past 6 months. But why? I couldn't see any obvious signs of unhappiness. Our intimate life was good, and we enjoyed each other's company. What led her into the arms of another man? My mind was racing, but I had to head to work. Before leaving, I made sure to copy all the emails onto a thumb drive to examine them later and maybe figure out more about Gary and why she did this. After shutting down her computer, I rushed off to work, consumed by thoughts of her and Gary. As I processed the shock of this revelation, anger welled up inside me, and I craved revenge on a grand scale. I'm not typically one for violence or seeking payback, but this situation was different. Her betrayal was unforgivable. I briefly pondered when and where it all began, but decided it didn't matter. What I did want was to learn more about Gary and how I could make his life miserable. I didn't wish harm on him, although the thought did cross my mind. Instead, I wanted them both to experience a very public humiliation. However, I still needed to plan carefully with 6 weeks ahead. I closed the door to my office at work and started brainstorming. I needed more information about Gary and the specifics of their trip. Then, an idea struck me on how to disrupt their plans and expose their affair in a way that she couldn't deny. It was a bold plan, but I was determined to make her face the consequences. Throughout the day, I managed to accomplish some real work, but my mind kept returning to my scheme. When it was time to leave, I stayed back in my office for over an hour, jotting down what I needed and how to obtain it. I also noted the risks involved in my plan. If things went wrong or I got caught, it could mean serious trouble, possibly even jail time. But I was willing to take that chance to gather more information on Gary. I knew I needed access to Kathy's email and computer. Initially, I considered downloading password cracking software, but I quickly realized that it could leave a digital trail. If I wanted to execute this without getting caught, I needed to be careful. So I had to find a way to obtain what I needed without leaving any trace back to me. Over the next few days, I purchased disposable cell phones from different stores, paying with cash. I also obtained a small laptop that I could use at places with free Wi-Fi. This way, my actions couldn't be traced back to my workplace or home. Additionally, I bought several wireless video cameras and bugs to discreetly place around the house, hoping to capture evidence of her bringing this person into our bed for their extramarital activities. The thought made my blood run cold, but perhaps their discussions about the upcoming trip would provide me with the necessary information for my plan. As time passed, I made an effort to act normal around my wife, so she wouldn't suspect that I knew about her affair. It was challenging, but after a few weeks, pretending became second nature. I would smile at her affectionately, while secretly seething at the thought of her being with another man. I suppose I missed my true calling as an actor. During this time, I reached out to some old friends using one of the disposable phones I had purchased, ensuring there would be no connection back to me. My first call was to a college buddy I hadn't spoken to in over 14 years. Steve was a real party animal back then, the go-to guy for a good time. "Hey, Steve. How have you been, man?" At first, Steve didn't remember, but after reminiscing about our college parties, it all came back to him. "Hey, Hank. Yeah, it's all coming back to me now. Those were some good times, huh? What have you been up to lately?" I quickly filled him in on what I had been doing since college, and he shared that things hadn't turned out quite as he had hoped, but he was hanging in there. Then, I suggested meeting in person. It wasn't just about reminiscing, I had to be cautious about bringing up the real issue. "I require assistance, and I thought you might be the person for the job. How about we meet for lunch and discuss it?" He hesitated briefly, then agreed, saying, "Sure thing. Anything for an old college buddy." We arranged to meet at a location away from my workplace but close to his, a few days later. I was really relying on his help, as time was running out, and I had no one else to turn to. In the meantime, I had set up cameras and bugs in the bedroom and living room, assuming those would be the areas where they would likely converse and engage in other activities. After the first week, the recordings didn't reveal anything significant. I started to think that maybe they were meeting at his place, as it might be less risky for their affair. However, the following week told a different story. It appeared that she brought Gary over to our place one late morning, and they spent over 2 hours engaging in intimate acts in every possible position. It disgusted me to watch, but I had to endure it to see if they would discuss their trip or reveal any useful details. Yet, they didn't. The next week, I checked the cameras again and saw that they were back, but this time, not for intimacy. They simply discussed their upcoming trip, giving me the information I needed, the flight number and departure time. As I listened in, I could hear the excitement in my wife's voice as they made plans. I was beyond furious, even considering causing them harm, but I pushed that thought aside. I wanted both of them to suffer for a long time. This revenge was going to haunt them for the rest of their lives, even beyond the grave. I imagined a day when my soon-to-be ex-wife, old and gray, lay on her deathbed, and I would come in with a smile, leaning over to tell her how I had ruined her Hawaii trip. I would stand up, flash a smile at her as she stared at me in shock, then turn and walk away, now more determined than ever to succeed. I still had one risky task left to tackle. I finally learned more about Gary. He and my wife both work as personal trainers at the same health club. It turns out he has a habit of pursuing married women, but that's about to encounter a rough patch. He lives close to the club in a small condo complex, so I decided to conduct some surveillance. I took a day off from work, informing my boss that I had personal matters to attend to before our business trip. Equipped with a digital camera with a powerful zoom, I observed his place for a few hours. It was a simple 2-bedroom complex, and it seemed that his neighbors were away during the day for work. With no security cameras in sight, this worked well for my covert plans. During my meeting with Steve, I felt anxious about what I had to ask him. It was the riskiest part of my plan, but if I could obtain what I needed, it would be worth it. When I spotted Steve entering the restaurant, I beckoned him over to the table where I was seated. It was tucked away in the back, and the place was relatively quiet, with only a few customers enjoying a late lunch. As he approached, he greeted me with a familiar "long time no see, bro." I wasted no time and went straight to the point. Steve appeared worse for wear, like he could have been an extra on a zombie show. I wanted to keep our conversation brief. If he couldn't assist me, I would have to seek help elsewhere. We reminisced about our college days and the epic parties Steve used to host. He was quite the party animal back then, but it seemed to have taken a toll on him. He looked much older than his actual age, at least 15 years older. I needed to get to the point, so I asked him directly why I had invited him. I wanted to see if he or someone he knew could help me acquire some items for a private event I was planning. I handed him a list and asked if he could assist me. I assured him I would compensate him for his help. Steve glanced at the list, initially looking surprised, but then he grinned. He agreed to help without hesitation, saying it sounded like an exciting party. He even asked if he could bring along an old college buddy named Rel D. I agreed, as long as he could procure the items on the list. I told him that once he had everything, I would provide the details for the party. Steve requested upfront cash to purchase the items, so I handed him an envelope containing several $1,000s. He commented on the scale of the party and confirmed that the cash was more than enough. We arranged to meet the following week for the exchange, and I gave him my new cell phone number in case of any issues. With everything settled, we left the restaurant. It was crucial that everything went smoothly, as my wife and her lover were set to depart the day after I left for my trip. 2 weeks before my departure, I met with Steve, and he managed to procure everything I needed. All I had to do was hide these items until the timing was perfect. 3 days before my trip, I left work early and checked my wife's packed suitcase. It was all prepared for her journey, carefully packed by the cheating woman. I discreetly slipped a few surprises into her bag as a parting gift. I made sure to hide them well, so she wouldn't discover them while packing or unpacking. However, I wasn't aiming for her to find them anyway. Then, I embarked on another risky step, breaking into Gary's place. I knew his work schedule, so that wasn't a problem. However, I had never attempted anything like this before. I purchased a lockpick set and learned the techniques from a book. I discovered some fascinating items available for purchase online. It's incredible what you can find on the internet. I practiced my lock-picking skills on various locks at home and at work, and I became quite proficient at it. Feeling confident in my abilities, I asked my boss for an extended lunch break and headed to Gary's condominium with my lockpick set. To my surprise, I managed to pick the lock swiftly, gaining entry to his home in just over a minute. I focused on speed as I wanted to execute my plans quickly and leave no trace behind. Wearing latex gloves, I made my way straight to his bedroom, where I found his packed bag prepared for the trip. Just like with my wife's suitcase, I added a few travel gifts to his bag to make their journey memorable. Afterward, I proceeded to the kitchen and came across a can of coffee. I emptied the coffee into a mixing bowl, placed some packets at the bottom of the can, refilled it with coffee, and put it back where I found it. I took care to ensure that everything appeared undisturbed. With everything back in its place, I left Gary's residence and returned home. However, I still had one more task to complete. A couple of days before my trip, I reached out to a friend who had a cousin working with the Transportation Security Administration at the airport. I had all the necessary details about my wife and Gary's flight. Now the challenge was to relay this information to the right person without revealing its source. I contacted my friend but was cautious in explaining where I obtained the information. "Jack, I need a favor, but please keep this information confidential," I said. I provided him with the flight details and Gary's name, but withheld mentioning my wife's involvement. Jack agreed to discreetly pass on the information to his cousin. I also made sure to remove all the cameras and bugs, ensuring that no one could discover them. Additionally, I left some surprises in Kathy's car to add to her troubles. The day before my trip, I decided to have a little fun at my wife's expense. When I arrived home from work, I sat down, looking upset. My wife noticed and asked, "What's wrong?" "Something significant happened at work today," I replied solemnly. "The clients we were supposed to meet canceled the meeting, so now I won't be jetting off on that trip. It's a missed opportunity for the company to grow." I made a lighthearted remark, and I could see the shock and worry on her face. That's when it dawned on me that she might have been plotting to get me out of town so she and Gary could enjoy their Hawaii getaway. I decided to test her by suggesting that they could still send me on the trip to salvage the situation with the clients we had dedicated so much time and effort to. I played on her emotions, hinting at the potential waste of our hard work. She tried to guilt-trip me, but it only fueled my anger. How could she talk about shame when she had none? Soon, both she and Gary would pay dearly for their actions. I chuckled and reassured her, pretending it was all a joke. "Just kidding, honey. The trip is still on. No worries." Relief washed over her face, and she grinned. "You had me going there for a sec." "So, are you all packed?" she asked. I replied, "Yep, just need to toss a few things in my carry-on, and I'm good to go." She inquired if I had any plans while I was away, suggesting a girls' night out or something. I dismissed the idea, saying, "Nah, nothing like that. I'll just be here waiting for my dear hubby to come back." God, her comment almost made me burst out laughing, but my anger held me back. The next day, my wife drove me to the airport and dropped me off. I gave her a long, passionate kiss, my hands caressing her face. It would be the last kiss I'd ever give her, so I wanted it to be memorable. I joined the rest of the group, and we boarded the flight. The journey was smooth, and once we landed and checked into the hotel, I called home using the hotel room phone. No one answered, so I left a message. "Honey, I did something dumb. I left my phone in the cab and won't be able to call you until I retrieve it or get a new one. If you need me, leave a message at the front desk, and I'll call you later." In truth, I hadn't forgotten my phone, I just needed an excuse not to take her calls. The following day arrived, and I made sure to turn off my phone to avoid any disturbances during my client meetings. When I returned to my hotel room, I checked for messages, but there were none. So I turned on my phone and found no messages from my wife or anyone else. Perhaps they managed to pass through airport security. The next day, the meetings went even better than the initial ones, and we returned to the hotel early. There were several messages waiting for me on the hotel room phone. One was from my wife, another from her father, and the third from a DEA agent, which brought a smile to my face. I then checked my cell phone and saw several messages waiting for me. I decided to listen to the messages on the hotel phone first. The first one was from my wife, and she was crying. "Baby, it's me. I'm in big trouble, and I really need you. Please come home now. Please." After that, all I heard was crying. The next message was from my soon-to-be ex-father-in-law, Hank. He informed me that my wife had been trying to contact me, as she had been arrested and needed my immediate return. He pleaded for me to call him back when I had the chance. The final message was from a DEA agent named DeFranco. He introduced himself and mentioned my wife's arrest on drug-related charges. He provided his contact information and requested that I get in touch with him. I was elated and couldn't contain my smile, but I had to maintain a serious demeanor around my colleagues. Everything had gone according to plan thus far, but I still needed to feign surprise and shock to avoid arousing suspicion of my involvement. The next morning, I reached out to my boss and informed him about a grave family matter without going into specifics. He agreed to let me temporarily leave the meetings to handle the emergency, but emphasized the importance of returning promptly to finalize deals with our clients. I swiftly boarded the first flight back home, and upon arrival, I retrieved my misplaced cell phone. I immediately called my father-in-law, eager to understand the situation. "What's happening?" "I received your message, but I can't believe it. Kathy was arrested on drug charges. She doesn't use any illegal substances." "Did this happen at the health club?" I inquired, already aware of where the incident took place. To my surprise, her father responded in a hushed tone, evidently embarrassed. "No, she was traveling to Hawaii with a friend, and they were apprehended at the airport security. Illegal items were discovered on both her and her companion," he confessed. I paused for a moment, trying to process the information. "Hold on a second, just hold on. She told me she'd be home and had no plans. Who was this friend she was going to Hawaii with?" "I bet one of her girlfriends persuaded her to go and dragged her into this mess," I speculated. There was a brief hesitation from her father before he spoke again. "I know it wasn't with a female friend. The important thing to remember here, Hank, is that she's in trouble and needs your help. She loves you, and I know you love her too," he pleaded. Cutting him off, I demanded, "What aren't you telling me, Dad? Who was she traveling with?" My voice rose as I vented my frustration, feeling a twisted sense of satisfaction. There was a moment of silence, followed by his throat clearing. "She was traveling with a man named Gary. He has also been arrested," he admitted reluctantly. I interjected once more, my anger seeping through. "So, you're telling me that my wife, my own daughter, flew off to Hawaii with another man while I was diligently working to earn a living, and now she's caught with illegal drugs? Is that what you're telling me?" I asserted, "Yes, I'm afraid that's what I'm telling you." He responded, and I took a momentary pause. "Okay, I need to speak with her lawyer and then this DEA agent. After that, I'll talk to her. We'll see what happens next, but she better have a compelling explanation for why she was about to travel to Hawaii with another man and had illegal substances with her." I contemplated silently. I ended the call with her father before he could reply. Upon arriving home, I noticed a stack of over 20 waiting messages. I proceeded to listen to them one by one. The initial message was about my misplaced cell phone, while the subsequent ones were from Kathy, hoping I would check our messages during my business trip. Several messages were from her father, and the rest were from her lawyer, urging me to contact them urgently. I dialed the lawyer's number, but since he wasn't available at that moment, I scheduled an appointment for the following morning. Next, I called DEA agent DeFranco and agreed to meet him at his downtown office later that afternoon. I swiftly freshened up and made my way, all the while attempting to discern whether I had covered my tracks well enough to prevent any repercussions. Soon enough, I found myself in what appeared to be an interrogation room. Agent DeFranco entered, carrying a folder. "Glad you could spare the time to meet with me," he greeted. "I have some questions about your wife that I was hoping you could answer," he added, glancing at the contents of the folder. I attempted to portray a sense of disbelief as I responded. "Listen, my wife isn't involved with illegal substances. As far as I've known her, she's never taken anything unlawful. Honestly, she doesn't even consume alcohol that much. This must be a significant misunderstanding or a mistake. She's a yoga instructor, for crying out loud. Why would she be entangled in illegal activities?" I tried to act somewhat indignant, but Agent DeFranco remained unfazed. "People make all sorts of foolish choices for various senseless reasons," he retorted, without raising his gaze. "Now, did you know your wife was going to Hawaii with this individual named Gary? She claimed he was just a friend, but Gary alleges they were embarking on a romantic getaway. So, do you know Gary? Were you aware of your wife having an affair? Did you have any inkling about the illegal substances?" He stared at me intensely. Taking a deep breath to steady myself, I replied, "I had no knowledge of any of this until I spoke with my father-in-law this morning. But I still find it hard to believe. She must have been manipulated into this. She's too virtuous of a person to get entangled in something like this." I avoided pushing the limits, knowing that this agent could detect falsehoods with ease. I had to tread cautiously. "Well, I guess you weren't aware. Hate to break it to you, buddy, but your wife was cheating on you with an illicit dealer, of all people. We've already conducted a search of his residence and discovered even more pills. Soon, we'll be searching your home as well. You can either cooperate and allow us entry, or we'll obtain a search warrant. Either way, we'll be conducting a search of your premises soon," he declared, his gaze unwavering. I was aware that her lawyer would advise against it, but this was about safeguarding myself and appearing more transparent. So I agreed, and before long I found myself back at the house, accompanied by numerous DEA and FBI agents, along with a couple of their canine companions. They meticulously combed through everything, seizing a few items, including pill containers she kept in the medicine cabinet. The next day, during my meeting with Kathy's lawyer, I briefed him on my conversation with DeFranco and the subsequent search. He wasn't pleased. "If you're approached by any law enforcement, I want to be present before you say anything." "Understood?" he emphasized. I nodded, feeling irritated. "Let me be perfectly clear," I asserted. "I want to know every detail that led to my wife's arrest. All I know is that she was on the verge of flying to Hawaii with this individual named Gary. If either of you wants assistance, someone better start explaining how this unfolded." "Am I making myself clear?" he responded. "I can't discuss your wife's case with you," he replied. That's when I walked out. Next, I headed to the jail where she was being held and requested to see her. We were in a room with other inmates, with round metal tables bolted down and stools. She entered, dressed in an orange prison jumpsuit, devoid of makeup, her hair pulled back into a disheveled ponytail. She appeared utterly exhausted, as if sleep had eluded her for days. "Oh, baby, I'm so relieved you're here," she sobbed. I wanted to embrace her, but a guard intervened, stating that physical contact was not allowed. This only intensified her crying. "It's okay, honey. We'll find a way to untangle this mess. Right now, I need to hear your side of the story. How did you end up on the verge of going to Hawaii with this guy?" I inquired calmly. Her tears flowed even more profusely. "Hank, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry," she expressed remorsefully. "So, it's true. You were having an affair with this guy, Gary, a seller of illegal pills. How could you? Weren't you content with our relationship? Don't you love me? I just can't comprehend it, him, you, and the pills. What were you thinking?" I paused, fully aware that she didn't have an answer. Please believe me when I say that I've always loved you. It was a mistake. Can you find it in your heart to forgive me? She pleaded. I gazed at her for a moment, then spoke up. Perhaps I could have forgiven you, but you shattered my heart entirely. So I cannot forgive you. When I leave here, I'm consulting a divorce lawyer and changing all the locks on the house. I will send all your belongings to your parents' place because I want to erase every remnant of you from my home. You are no longer a part of my life, and please inform your lawyer not to use me as a character witness because I won't speak favorably about you. Farewell, Kathy. I wish you the best, I declared. She sobbed and pleaded for me to stay, claiming that she needed me. Without looking back, I headed home and began packing her belongings. The following day, I enlisted the services of a locksmith to change all the locks, and I scheduled a security company to install a top-notch system the following week. In just a matter of days, I had most of her possessions packed and ready to be sent to her parents' house. I received numerous calls from Kathy, but I intentionally disregarded them. I had no desire to engage in conversation with her. Eventually, I returned to work, focusing my efforts on securing those crucial clients we had been pursuing. As a result, I was promoted, accompanied by a salary increase. The process of divorcing Kathy went smoothly. It was a straightforward separation, devoid of any spousal support. Moreover, she was responsible for covering her own legal fees stemming from her arrest related to the pills. Despite her persistent attempts to reach out to me, I maintained my distance. Kathy did not proceed to trial due to the overwhelming evidence against her, and her lawyer advised her to accept a plea deal for a reduced sentence. She was discontented with this outcome. On the other hand, Gary fought vigorously to prove his innocence, but was ultimately handed a 15-year prison sentence. Kathy, on the other hand, received a 5-year term. The day of Kathy's sentencing arrived, and she expressed a desire to meet me for one last time before heading to court. Reluctantly, I agreed, and we rendezvoused at her lawyer's office an hour before her scheduled appearance. She appeared teary-eyed as she gazed at me. "Hank, I want you to understand that Gary meant nothing to me. It's you I've always loved and will continue to love. I'm genuinely sorry for hurting you like this. It was never meant to unfold in this manner. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me someday," she pleaded, her voice trembling with emotion. "Kathy, there's one thing I need to comprehend. Why did you do it? Were you bored? Did I fail to satisfy you in bed? Was it the allure of engaging in something illicit and getting away with it? What compelled you to do this and destroy our marriage?" I asked, a sense of sorrow permeating my words. She locked eyes with me, her expression filled with uncertainty. Honestly, I don't know why. Perhaps it was the thrill of indulging in something forbidden. But I truly loved you. "I suppose you didn't love me enough, or else you wouldn't have done this," she responded, her voice tinged with sadness. "Kathy, I hope this is the last interaction we have to endure. I don't want to see or hear from you ever again. I want you to spend your time in prison contemplating what you've lost because of your yearning for excitement. Perhaps you'll encounter some riveting experiences once the other inmates take notice of you," I stated, a mix of finality and disdain coloring my words. She began crying once more, this time out of fear. Over the next few years, the company flourished, and I ascended to the position of vice president. We expanded our business, establishing an office in New York, and I was chosen to spearhead the venture. Consequently, I sold my house, relocated to Manhattan, and acquired an apartment. In the early stages, Kathy sent me a few letters, but I returned them without opening them. That chapter of my life was firmly closed, and I was ready to forge ahead. 7 years have passed since then, and life in New York has been satisfying. I remained single, and the dating scene in the city has treated me favorably. I remained single, casually dating different women every few months. The thought of getting married again and risking betrayal held no appeal for me. While I sat in my office, a call from the lobby interrupted my thoughts. My assistant, Amy, entered and informed me that there was a woman downstairs who insisted on speaking with me. She claimed her name was Kathy. I paused for a moment, then instructed Amy to bring Kathy up, but to have 2 security guards nearby. I also gave Amy a task, writing it down and handing it to her. "Call me a few minutes after you bring her in," I said. Amy read the note and smiled. A few minutes later, Kathy entered my office. She appeared at least 10 years older and had put on some weight, in an unflattering way. Her once beautiful long brown hair now displayed streaks of gray and appeared frizzy. I noticed the tired bags under her eyes. Her clothing was stylish but conservative, and it seemed a bit outdated. As I looked at her, I felt nothing, no love, no hate, not even pity. I was emotionally empty. "So, Kathy, what brings you here?" I asked, devoid of any warmth. "Hank, I was hoping to talk to you." I felt an urge to explain what happened to me. Honestly, I had no clue about the substances, and I still don't know how they ended up in my bags. Gary must have sneaked them in without my knowledge. I'm not into substances, never have been. Please believe me. "I'm begging you," Kathy pleaded with desperation in her voice. "Kathy, you destroyed our marriage for a fling and turned our entire relationship into a lie. Why should I trust you now? Why did you go to such lengths to find me just to tell me another lie?" I responded, my tone firm. "You don't get it, Hank. I love you. I still do. I want us to be together again." "I want to make things right," Kathy insisted. Just then, my desk phone rang, and I put it on speaker. "Yes, Amy, what's up?" I inquired. "Stacy called to confirm that you should get 4 tickets for the opening, as her parents are coming into town and want to meet you. Let her know that I'll buy 4 tickets. Also, find out where her parents are staying. I want to send her mother a dozen roses," Amy informed me. I ended the call and turned my attention back to Kathy. "You were saying?" I prompted. Kathy was on the verge of tears. "Who's Stacy?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Oh, she's just someone I've been seeing lately. But you're not here to talk about my dating life. You mentioned you still have feelings for me. While I appreciate that, I want to make it clear that I don't feel the same way about you anymore. When your affair came to light, and your plans to go to Hawaii with Gary were revealed, your father informed me. I was done with our relationship. Now, please go, and I don't want to see you again. Do you understand?" I asserted, my voice unwavering. I listened attentively as Kathy tried to explain, but I knew I had no involvement with the pills they found. "I've had enough of your deceit, Kathy. You cheated on me in the past, and you're still lying now. Please leave and never return. I've informed security to have you arrested if you come back. Do you understand?" Kathy cried silently, but she nodded in acknowledgement. I escorted her to the door, and the security guards escorted her out. Amy entered the room afterward and asked, "What was that all about?" I replied, "Oh, that was just me bidding farewell to a chapter of my life."